Welcome to our professional revenge channel, where a teacher takes revenge on his lousy students. The story starts like this. The year this happened, I taught a high school class, with students aged 14 to 18, from different grades. My subject was not mandatory to graduate, but it was a basic requirement. One of my rules at the beginning of the year was that I never wanted to hear the question, "When are we going to need this?" because you didn't have to enroll in that class. My methodology was based on making students responsible for their own actions. My class had something for everyone. If you put in the least amount of effort, you'd get a C. If you worked harder, you could get a B or an A. I would go out of my way to help a student with any reasonable demand. The best example of this was when a student was working hard on an assignment and said they understood it but couldn't turn it in on time. I replied, "Then hand it in tomorrow and get full marks." That's how hard work pays off. Apart from a few inflexible deadlines, in my class I did everything to see you learn the content. But if you faltered in my class, I already had ways around the lame excuses you gave your parents for your poor performance. It may sound insensitive, but I was the teacher who stayed 90 minutes after school to help you catch up, fix your other class project, or even listen to you vent about your parents' divorce. If I caught you fooling around in class instead of doing your work, my rule was that at least 70% of class time was devoted to tests, assignments, etc. I would email you a few times, let your parents know, and then wait to see if you change your ways. If it didn't change, I'd let you keep digging that hole until you were up to your neck in water and begging for a ladder. And then I'd throw you a rope instead. You could still climb in if you tried hard enough, but many children whimpered until the hole caved in and buried them. I could document when a student looked at the activity, how long it took, etc. All this allowed me to see what my students were doing, when they were doing it, and also if they were plagiarizing. This was also one of the tools that helped me make important decisions about leniency, and it also helped me say things in meetings like, "Of course the test was hard. Your son didn't do his homework from 9 p.m. until 11 a.m. night before the test." Being able to prove that a student wasn't trying made it impossible for blame to be unfairly thrown at my feet. It also meant that the worst kids avoided my class. However, this year something magical happened. Every other year I had a wave of kids who just wanted to mess around and blame everyone else for doing poorly at the end of the year. I was the butt of student gossip, and my classes got smaller the following year. But then I would get so many compliments from these kids, and everyone would want to sign up for my class, and so on. But this year was different. Not only did I have to deal with a class full of idiots, I also had to deal with parents who loved causing trouble. I already knew the fame of some of these parents. Other teachers were curious to know how I got along with them, because these parents were so overbearing and abusive. They always mentioned Laura's name when they didn't get what they wanted. They tried to convince teachers to give their children extra grades, and they denied any mistakes by their children. These were the parents who were called out because their child was caught cheating on the test, and then accused the teacher of teaching a class that was too difficult, thus justifying their child's cheating. So about these idiots, it was a group of like 7 seniors who changed their schedules to be in the same class. The other teachers didn't believe I had them all at once, but I didn't mind too much. Every week, the staff room wanted to know how I handled their antics, but for the most part one ignored most of the silly things they did from day one. I even got along well with them, despite their constant teasing, because they knew how to pretend to be busy and not disturb the other students. But then came the first group project. My class size was ideal for forming 7 groups of 4 students each. The bunch of idiots split into 2 groups of 4, picking up a student who was absent on the first day of the project. These 2 groups fared terribly on this project for a number of reasons, but the main one was that they played during class and left a 2-week assignment to do the weekend before it was due. They threw all the work on a single student, and each one did as little as possible. I gave the bad grades, and soon I was summoned to meetings with the parents of several of them, one by one, of course. All meetings were the same: my son did all the work and doesn't deserve a bad grade, or my child did not understand the task. Then I showed my super detailed rubric, which is a list of criteria that I use to evaluate the works, and that I never wanted to be accused of giving a grade based on dislike for a student. In general, it was like this: my son did all the work, and I don't think it's fair for him to get this grade. Here's the work your son turned in, I showed. Here's my rubric, which I printed out and emailed to your son the day the project started, I showed it. As you can see, I graded this rubric exactly. I would be happy to explain the grade your child got, and show you where the missing parts are. And the student would say, "Oh, the members of my group were responsible for that." I would answer, "I can't rate what I never received, so I can't just raise your son's grade, sorry." Now, good news for all my students. I offer extra credit during the semester, but many parents are unhappy, although they are relieved to know that their children can still get an A in my class. By the end of those meetings, it was clear that it wasn't my fault. After all, I had all the data to prove that I tried to contact everyone, etc. So it must be the fault of the other students, who these parents think are perfect angels. Being a genius, I had my students sign a group contract for each project, specifying who does what and when to deliver. This is important because the contract gives me the paperwork I need to be able to fire a bad group member and give him a 0 without his parents bothering me all day. But here is where the problem starts to show. These veterans are bouncing from group to group like cancerous ping pong balls, wreaking havoc. I let the students pick their groups, so these seniors desperately infiltrate anyone who will accept them. Because of my class size, each group has at least one Cato student to deal with. And those students end up rotating until every one of my students has worked with one of those seniors at some point. Now I'm getting constant complaints from other students' parents about these kids. Their kids wanted a good grade, which meant they ended up doing all the work while the seniors slacked off. This is usually after the fact, where I mention that I'd love to rip that parasite off their note, but they have to use the contract. Students don't want to say anything because they fear retaliation from seniors, but I can't do anything because I will be accused of harassment. The contract might give me the leverage I need to prove these students weren't doing any work because seniors have been playing their parents for years. I have my class use Google Docs because the changes are timestamped. It's no joke. I asked students to show all their work the morning of a parent conference, to try and lie to them and make me look like a piece of trash. But that timestamp is a blessing. Fortunately, my class is balanced. A bad group member can make things difficult, but not impossible. And the complaints of parents are completely mitigated, because I am still offering every chance of success. I'm not mad at their kids, but I'm disappointed in them. Every time I announce that their group projects are coming up, some of these seniors suck the other students up to the point of waiting for a spot to be made for them. Before the start of the group project, all seniors now sit at separate tables so they can use the "I'm here, let's form a group" trick. This works most of the time. The pressure on class morale is tough, but I'm biding my time. The other students are constantly being given extra credit opportunities so the grade can absorb the blow. My principal has a copy of my syllabus on his computer so he can show the student policies the parents have signed. It is not unusual for him to hear I have not read this, so it does not apply to me, but he reminds them that the sentence above the signature says that my signature indicates that I have read this entire document and agree to follow all the rules or something similar. And that this should be a lesson to the students' parents that when you sign something, you should read the fine print of the contract. So I have 7 lazy seniors, but I'll single out the worst of those: Larry, Curly, and Mo. Consequences affect them all, but these 3 are the ones whose parents take pleasure in causing trouble every time they pressure a teacher to yield. I imagine they gather in a smoking room over cigars and brandy, laughing and telling how they managed to outsmart yet another poor teacher. I know that anything I do will be heavily criticized as soon as the bug hits, and I need to be prepared to ignore it because I have other things to do and I refuse to be the fun topic of conversation at their party. However, a special note about Larry: since he turned 18, his parents are now traveling nonstop and impossible to contact. Larry is just a big asshole because his parents don't care what he does anymore. Also, in other cases, this may seem incomplete, but I usually do this with any of my students who struggle with the material so I can identify the problem. Like my class or all the students in their classes are known to falsify their grades using inspect element, and I got tired of hearing but they get A's in other subjects because then I look like crap. Anyway, after a check, I talked to the other teachers. It's not hard to find that these kids are doing the least amount of work in the other subjects, and I've really found that Larry has been finding ways to get other kids to do the work for him and then share it among his friends. Other teachers have been bullied into lightening the weight of evidence in their subject, and guess what? He and his friends are enrolled in these classes. Despite doing poorly on these tests, their homework and project grades give them a good margin, so most of them are low grades, but passing. I can't prove it, but they are using Snapchat, but when I bring it up with their teachers, the teachers are unwilling to try and prove it and face the parents. Now they are taking other stories lightly. However, their only recourse on my story is to keep switching between groups and taking advantage of their hard work to maintain C's and B's. And the other kids are too scared to use the group contract to kick them out. Remember how I mentioned that I constantly increased the value of my activities to get the kids working and give them a chance to improve their grades? On a random day in class, before finals, I might stress him out unnecessarily. Would you mind if I missed my class? Don't miss it, best teacher ever. Okay, well, just so you know, I'm going to push our next project back a few weeks and extend the deadline by a week as well. Since I canceled the last project, that means the next project will be worth about 20% of your final grade. So do your best. Messing it up could ruin your grade. My class is like a JPEG. In one step, I didn't inflate this task. I also sent an email to parents and students informing them of the program and assignment change. I received no responses other than happiness. And I'm taking the stress out of the end of the semester, etc. Because another teacher, who was a huge idiot, released a monster project in the same week. And I knew this would exhaust my students before finals. So I figured a break was in order when it came to me. Now, why did I change the point of maniacal laughter MP to the Friday before the project started? I announced at the beginning of class, okay, I'm going to introduce the project now, so you can form groups today. And we can start on Monday morning, no delay. Since this project is so important. That announcement elicited a room full of shaded smiles. Because it was senior burial day. Our school did not tolerate a burial day. So the kids did their best to keep it a secret. But I found out a month in advance. All 7 students were absent from class. Which meant I had just cleared the entire room of these dead weights. Immediately, groups are formed. And, even better, I had a few transfer students from my class this semester. Which means, numbers-wise, these idiots will have to work on that last group project together in 2 groups. I emphasized that everyone needed to get to class as soon as possible so they could start as soon as attendance was called. My original intention was to light a giant bonfire under all 7 idiots to make them really try. What they neglected to do all year round. Most of them had notes in the D's range except for one in the low B. As a bonus for all my students, I've put an extra portion of credit into this project so they can recoup their losses at the beginning of the semester. But it also allows these seniors to do really well if they put in the effort. This wasn't meant to be a tale of revenge, but an attempt to give them one last lesson in responsibility before the end of the year. At the end of the day, I sent notification to parents and students that the project had started and that all absent students needed to get in touch with their peers to set up groups before Monday morning. This was important, as you will see. I'm sure you can guess what happened next. The immediate fallout. The following Monday, seniors arrived seconds before the bell rang to find that there were only 2 tables to sit anywhere. They took their seats after the attendance. I said, okay, let's start the project. Everyone has received a copy of the rubric, so they can start group work with the rest of the class. The veterans pick up the rubric and look around in despair. They soon realize that they have fallen into a trap and begin to complain. The first thing that happens is that Larry, Curly and Mo decide that they are now part of whoever is sitting next to them and drag their chairs to other tables. I notice this right away and tell them that the groups are already formed and are limited to 4 people each. The other 4 seniors are already arguing among themselves, because they know that none of them are really going to do anything. Larry, who thinks he's the best student in the world, tries to negotiate with me and his group for special privileges and make a group of 5. I see some of the other kids are hesitant and I know Larry is pushing them to support his case. I created this project specifically for 4 people and had a task for each one, but I make a different proposal. I say that I accept that they stay together, but since there will be 5, I expect twice as much work. I literally tell them they'll have to do the project twice. Larry tries to argue, but I show him the papers I prepared and tell him that if 4 people can do it once, 5 must find it easier to do it twice. It seems like a dumb move on my part, but now I bully the other kids into saying no and even take a vote. Unsurprisingly, Larry is the only one who votes that this is a good idea, and when the other kids hear about my proposal, they kick out the other seniors who try to do the same deal. You will be happy to know that the rest of the term for my seniors is spent arguing over who is going to work with whom. They end up forming 3 groups and I nod to confirm they have a rubric and then wish them luck. Being the smart teacher that I am, I send an email to Curly's parents and Mo's mother letting them know they've chosen to work together. Mo's mother shows up to fight with me all the time, but she quickly learned that I will not tolerate her criticism in a previous meeting where she even got in a fight with Mo and told him I'm tired of fighting all these battles with his teachers and that I'm starting to think they're right about his problem. but I suspect this is just for show. Curly's parents email me saying they're going to make sure Curly writes a group contract. You see, Curly has sold himself as the best student ever, and clearly he's going to get the job done and dump his classmates. Mo's mother immediately requests a meeting with me. As per school policy, I am not required to respond to an email for 48 hours. I wait until the 47th hour and send her a no-obligation email saying I'd love to talk to her when she's available and wait for her response. So I wait another 48 hours to let her know a time the following week that works for me. Now, some of the other parents of veterans send me furious emails. When my students' parents questioned me why I allowed their children to work with the troublesome kids again, I had to explain that I didn't know they would all be suddenly absent. Some of my seniors stayed home because they dropped out and their parents asked me to help them pass. I agreed because some of them needed this class to graduate. But Mo's mother was different. She arrived ready to fight. She started by demanding that I change Mo's group. I denied it because the project had been going on for a week and it wouldn't be fair. She demanded that I put him in another group. I said they were full and the students had already done most of the work. She demanded that I let him work alone with a longer deadline. I kindly offered a longer deadline and handed him a copy of the initial. He turned pale. At that moment, he knew that he never planned to do any work. In fact, I knew his group hadn't even started. I had a copy of the group contract that was hastily penciled in with no due dates. He began to argue with his mother that he preferred working with his friends and that he was upset about being put in that situation. Thinking about it, she accused me of purposefully waiting until that day to harm the seniors. After all, it was a school-sanctioned event and I was being an asshole about it. And she would go to the board with her story. Wrong. The joy I felt from all my prep work was getting this bullshit over with. All 7 seniors were absent from her house on the day of the escape and told her that the principal had given them the day off. Even better, they called and impersonated their own parents, so it was an excused miss. He was immediately caught and his mother changed her tune and fell on top of him. You see, she could keep pressing me on this issue, but now I had proof that he impersonated his own father and that's grounds for school suspension. I stepped in by telling her that I had no idea seniors breakout day was that Friday, but I gave her son an extra deadline for work because I thought seniors deserved their own traditions, blah blah blah. She swallowed it all. I could prove that I emailed him and her and gave plenty of notice before Monday morning that they needed to form large groups before something like this happened. Obviously, when I found out about the escape day, I tried to notify her of her precious treasure, but I don't know why he didn't receive it. She made him open her email, my email was there, case closed, and I won that battle. She thanked me and took him home. Class morale was through the roof unless you were one of those seniors. A week before the project ended, no groups really started and the class average was about to hit an iceberg. The project was coming. It was no surprise that my smart-ass seniors easily turned in some of the worst jobs ever. One group texted the weekend before the deadline and had one of the kids do all the work. Curly and Mo were part of the same group. Another group, with Larry, also became a mess. I decided to fix these 2 projects before the others because I knew they would have big repercussions. All veterans lost at least 1 point. Some even dropped out 4 weeks before graduation. Larry didn't seem to care. They took like 10% off the bill, so I suspected he was up to something. Curly's parents asked for a meeting, as did Mo's mother. Curly's parents were very upset that they got a bad grade and wanted to know why. What they didn't know is that I had already talked to a student who did the entire project alone and with his parents. I showed Curly's parents the messages I exchanged with the seniors who broke up with him. Curly refused to show his parents his phone to confirm. I also showed them Curly's project and evaluation rubric. The parents were outraged as Curly had always blamed others for his mistakes since forever, and they had always believed in him until that day. The father sternly asked what part he had done, and that made Curly really cry. He was among the worst. My intention was to use the data to prove that their son never did his job right. Curly was devastated by this. His parents told him to leave the meeting as they were tired of his excuses and asked me what they could do. I told them I could tutor him and that he could still pass the class if he did his homework and did well on the next test. They agreed to it. We shook hands and they left. Curly's story ends something like this. He never showed up for tutoring and I emailed his parents. After 3 emails, his dad finally responded that he and mom had decided he needed to learn to be an adult and let him fend for himself, and thanked me for my efforts. Curly spent the rest of the semester doing almost nothing as he was grounded at home. Now he just watched YouTube videos on his cell phone during classes. It would be very ironic if he watched this video. The domino effect was wonderful, as Curly was now doing it in all his stories. I talked to the other teachers and they all emailed his parents saying he had stopped doing class work, and they got the same response I did instead of the angry responses they used to get when Curly was doing poorly. In the subjects, he managed to graduate, but his parents said they weren't going to pay for his college anymore and it was time to get a job. Mo's mother was furious and demanded an explanation. Unfortunately, Mo was in the same group as Curly and she got the same response as I did. Strangely, after trying everything and trying to blame me for what happened, she admitted that she knew Mo had participated in bullying the only senior and that he should be ashamed of himself. She deliberately tried to deceive me, but I already knew everything. It was very annoying, but I agreed to help him study individually, which she was happy about. The fights lasted a long time. Mo's mom emails me every day, "My son is struggling, can he count on you to help with his homework, etc." Never stops. But she knows she has no right to bug me. Larry is a very lively student, but he doesn't do anything at school. I found out that he's planning to go to a college that only requires a very low GPA, and he says an F in my class won't make a difference. So I just worry about not letting him get in the way of others. Mo only shows up once in a while, but oddly enough, Larry always comes over to say hello when I'm helping Mo. I don't understand why, but I suspect he's up to something and already has a plan B. You'll see Mo's mom is crazy, and I always make sure I have someone else in the room with me when I teach him. Anyway, Mo's mom keeps an eye on me the whole time. I start taking 48 hours to answer her emails because I can. And she starts dropping by unannounced to see how he's doing. That means she's been acting cautiously lately, and I'm starting to suspect something is going on. Larry is friends with Mo, so he keeps going over to his house and making up stories to convince his mom that I'm emotionally abusing Mo when nobody's around. As if I would stay after school just for that. And he still tells her that she can ask the school to check the cameras to see if I'm there. This starts an issue where she is now demanding explanations from the principal, but Opie is a smart admin and has asked me about the details of my interactions with Mo. And I ended up sitting down with my principal and Mo and his mother. She said that Mo is struggling, that he might not graduate, and that she thinks I singled out her son to mistreat. And since his grade got better, you see, Mo is dumb and lazy and his mom is just as bad. When Larry came to her with this story, she didn't even bother talking to her own son. He just agreed with everything. So I asked him candidly to describe what was said during our sessions and then offered to leave the room so he could talk to the director without me there. She told me to stay because she wanted me to hear from her son what I did to him. What they didn't know is that I was a mentor teacher who had a first-year teacher as my pupil. Not an intern, but a new hire working with a senior teacher to learn the rules of our school. And I had her help with grades and such in my room after school. You need so many contract hours on the days I agreed to meet Mo. She was young, so Mo thought she was another student and never questioned it. And he couldn't even remember she was there. My principal already had depositions from her detailing my interactions with Mo. And Mo couldn't give any real details and he suddenly forgot what he had been told. This situation got Mo's mother and Larry into trouble with the principal. And she blamed Larry for everything and was visibly upset that she had fallen into such a stupid trap. This resulted in an email warning teachers to be left alone in a room with any student. Suddenly, the helping actors evaporated for the two of them. But hey, I always have someone in my room, so whatever. After that meeting, Larry is very distressed about his grade. He cannot study because he has children who demand a lot from him. His days off are rare and he knows that the teacher is absent and doesn't teach properly. Now that the other teachers are suspicious of him, he can no longer negotiate to improve his grades. Seriously, the teachers are already tired of this talk, that he changes his attitude every semester. Mo's mother makes one last attempt and tells me that the parents of the seniors have set up a meeting with my boss to fire me for giving their kids a low grade and that she could praise me if I found her. I'm standing next to the director when I get this email and he doesn't even know what she's talking about. I tell her that I would be happy to meet them all, but that I would probably eat my lunch during the meeting and hope that no one is bothered by the smell of fish. She tells me it's not a joke, that they are threatening to sue me, but I pretend not to understand and tell her that I can't be sued for eating fish during a meeting. She sees that I don't give a shit and that she can't bully me. She has nothing she can do, because I'm just following policy. The last few weeks are chaos for these seniors. One by one, they give up, because they haven't done much in the last few years and don't know how to push themselves. Other teachers are inspired by how I stand up to them and finally hold them back. Some of them manage to pass my class with low grades. The rest disapprove. I get some desperate requests for how they can boost their grades, but I have proof that none of them have tried the extra credit activities and this was their chance. It's hard for a parent to complain about you when you can show that he really tried to give students extra credit and can prove that they never opened the assignment online. These guys are now failing some of your other classes. Some of them cry in my class and run away. Their friendships are falling apart, because now they hate each other for what happened. They'll get over it over the summer. My last test came and I took an online multiple choice test. It was easy enough to shuffle the questions and answers into random order, meaning they couldn't stick together. I had known for a long time that they sat together to try and cheat on the exam. Larry spent a lot of money on tutors to try to help his friends. This confuses them, and when Mo's mother accuses me again of trying to trick her son with a much tougher test, I manage to brush her off with a simple email. Larry passes the test, but his grade goes up to a weak D-. The results of these 7 seniors are: 1 didn't graduate and had to change schools. His parents were embarrassed because they paid to take the whole family to the graduation he couldn't attend. 2 of the seniors lost all their scholarships and could no longer go to the schools they wanted. Their alternate plan was to go to the same school together and share a room, which they did with 3 of the other seniors, including Mo. Larry wasn't happy with his final GPA. I don't know what his long-term plan was, but it sucked. College kicked him out before he even started and found out he lied to his parents a lot too. He took a trip to Europe this summer and wanted to surprise his parents by coming home instead of going to school, but it seems they kicked him out soon after because they were selling their house to buy an apartment somewhere else. But you have to understand they traveled a lot for work now, so they wanted to downsize. Last I heard, he made up a story that he joined the army but was discharged because of a fake illness. I say fake because I heard this story from 3 different people and each told me a different illness. Curly's parents were frustrated and decided to pay Curly to go to college. After all, Curly was expelled mid-year. He was arrested more than once for drinking, being underage, and then kicked him out of the house after living there for a year and refusing to get a job. In the past, I hear he works at a vape shop. Mo went to college and used his smarts to try and pay other kids to do his job for him. His mom is rich. When it didn't work out, he faked his grades to make his mom keep paying the bill. Eventually college threw him out and he came home. The story his mom told a friend of hers I met at a school event was that he decided he would rather be an entrepreneur than go to college, and that he bought a drone to film weddings with. Last I heard, he was acting as a distributor for his pot dealer but switched to selling acid on his own. His mother thinks he is working on weddings. A senior went to college with his friends and immediately realized he needed to change. He stopped hanging out with his friends, and last I knew he graduated with honors in a lucrative field. He emailed me wanting to thank me for challenging him in high school because it prepared him for college, so that was good. Thanks for reading, and if you ever had a teacher you loved, email them. We love hearing from our kids. Opie is the perfect example of someone giving someone more rope to hang themselves with. This teacher destroyed his students' lives, but more accurately, he just allowed the students to destroy their own lives with their nasty behavior. He gave them every opportunity to succeed, and each time, they basically spit in his face. That was our revenge slash. And if you liked this video, hit the subscribe button because I put new Reddit videos every day.